3 days. That's how long my daughter had been asking me not to come visit. Dad, we're still unpacking. It's a mess here. Just wait a little longer. That's what she kept saying every time I called. And every time, I told myself she was right. She was a grown woman. She didn't need her father showing up unannounced, hovering around like I used to do when she was 16. But on the morning of the 4th day, something shifted in me. I can't explain it the way a doctor would. I just know that I woke up at 5:30 in the morning, sat on the edge of my bed in the dark, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not worry exactly. Something older than worry. Something that had no name but felt very serious. My wife Margaret had passed 4 years earlier. Pancreatic cancer, quick and merciless. Since then, it had been just me in the house in Knoxville, Tennessee, and my daughter Celia down in Savannah, Georgia, where she and her husband Marcus had just bought their first house together. That was the reason she'd gone down new house, new life. A fresh start after 2 years of renting apartments that never quite felt like home. I retired from 31 years of civil engineering the previous spring. I had time. I had a running truck. I had a cooler I could pack with sandwiches and a thermos of coffee. There was no good reason I couldn't make the 5-hour drive down to Savannah to surprise my daughter with a visit, except she'd asked me not to. I sat with that for a while. Then I thought about the last time we'd spoken on the phone 2 nights before. She'd sounded tired in a way that didn't sound like unpacking boxes tired. She'd been quiet in the spaces between sentences. When I asked if everything was all right, she said, "Of course, Dad, everything's fine." But she said it just a little too fast. The way people say things when they've rehearsed the answer before the question was even asked. I packed the cooler. I locked the house. I pulled out of the driveway at 6:15 in the morning with the sun just starting to come up over the ridge. I stopped once for gas outside of Chattanooga and once more at a rest area near the Georgia state line. I made it to Savannah by 11:30. I had the address memorized. I'd looked the neighborhood up on a map several times because that's what I do. I study things before I arrive. Old habit from the engineering days. Know your terrain before you walk it. The neighborhood was a quiet one. Older homes with deep front porches and big oak trees that had been growing long enough to crack the sidewalks. The kind of street where people still check their mail in person instead of from their phones. I parked along the curb 2 houses down because I didn't want to pull straight into the driveway and startle anyone. I grabbed the flowers I'd picked up at a gas station outside of the city. Nothing fancy. Just a bunch of yellow sunflowers wrapped in plastic, the kind Margaret always kept in a mason jar on the kitchen windowsill. I figured Celia might like having something of her mother's sensibility in her new house. I was halfway up the front walk when the door opened. I expected to see Celia. Or Marcus. What I saw instead was a woman I didn't recognize. She was somewhere in her 50s, heavyset, wearing a green cleaning apron with a logo I couldn't read from that distance. She took one look at me, and her face went white. Then she stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door shut behind her quickly, deliberately, like she was sealing something inside. "Don't come in," she said. Her voice was low and very controlled. "Please, don't go in that house right now." I stopped walking. "Excuse me? Who are you?" "My name is Dolores. I clean for the family." She came down 2 porch steps toward me and lowered her voice even further. "Are you her father? You look like her. Are you Celia's dad?" Something dropped in my stomach. "Yes. What's happened?" She looked behind her at the door, then back at me. "I found her this morning when I came in. She was on the kitchen floor. I've already called 911. They're on their way. She's breathing." But Dolores stopped. She pressed her hand flat against her sternum like she was trying to hold herself together. "Something is very wrong with her. I don't know what. But something is very wrong. I don't remember walking past her. I don't remember opening the door. What I remember next is standing in the kitchen doorway and seeing my daughter lying on the tile floor with a dish towel bunched under her head, her eyes half open, her skin the color of old ash. Celia. I went down on my knees beside her. "Celia, it's Dad. I'm here. Can you hear me?" She moved her lips. Nothing came out that I could understand. "The ambulance is coming," Dolores said from behind me. She had followed me in. I told them to hurry. I stayed with her the whole time. I didn't leave her alone. How long has she been like this? I don't know. I got here at 9. She was already on the floor. I thought at first she had fainted, but then I tried to wake her, and she stopped again. I gave her some water, a little bit, but she couldn't really swallow it. I took Celia's hand. It was cold. Her pulse, when I found it at her wrist, was there, but thin and unsteady, like a radio station fading in and out. I stayed on the floor beside her until the paramedics came. They worked fast. There were 3 of them. They asked me questions I answered without fully hearing myself answer. I watched them check her eyes, hook up a monitor, start a line in her arm. One of them, a young woman with red hair, pulled back tight, looked up at me and said, "Sir, do you know if she has any medical conditions? Any medications she takes regularly?" "Not that I know of," I said. "She's 34. She's healthy. She's never had anything serious." The red-haired paramedic looked at her partner. Something passed between them that I couldn't read. They took her to Memorial Health University Medical Center. I followed behind the ambulance the whole way, gripping the steering wheel with both hands, saying nothing. There was nothing to say that would have helped anything. At the hospital, they brought me to a waiting area and told me someone would come speak with me soon. I sat in a blue plastic chair under fluorescent lights and stared at the wall and thought about Margaret. About how I had sat in a waiting room, not unlike this one 4 years ago, and had also been told someone would come speak with me soon. About how that conversation had ended. I called Marcus. He answered on the second ring. "Hey Frank, what's up? Where are you right now?" A pause. "I'm at work." "Why? What's going on?" "Celia's in the hospital. I'm at Memorial Health. You need to come now." Another pause, longer this time. "What? What happened? Is she okay?" "I don't know yet. They're with her now. Just come, Marcus. Come right now." He arrived 45 minutes later. He came through the sliding doors in his work clothes, business casual, a blue button-down, slacks, and his face was tight in the way faces get when a person is trying very hard to look more concerned than they are. I noticed it, but I didn't know what to do with it, so I filed it away the way I've always filed things that don't immediately make sense. You store them. You wait. Eventually they fit somewhere. He sat next to me. He asked the right questions. He said the right things. But he kept checking his phone. Not in the obvious way, not the way a person checks their phone when they're bored. In a careful, measured way. The way a person checks their phone when they're waiting for a specific message. About an hour after Marcus arrived, a doctor came out to find us. His name was Dr. Alvarado. He was a compact man, gray at the temples, with the kind of steady manner that I associated with people who delivered difficult news regularly and had learned how to do it without flinching. He shook my hand, then Marcus's, and then he asked if we would come with him somewhere more private. We followed him down a hallway and into a small consultation room, with 2 chairs and a window that looked out on a parking structure. "Your wife is stable," he said to Marcus first. Then he turned to me. "Your daughter is stable. We have her on an IV, and we're monitoring her closely." "What happened to her?" I asked. Dr. Alvarado folded his hands together on the table. "We ran some preliminary blood work when she came in. There were several things that concerned us, and we've sent additional samples to the lab. But based on what we're seeing right now," he paused. "Mr. Harlan, has your daughter been feeling unwell lately? Any symptoms in the past few weeks? Fatigue? Confusion? Nausea?" I looked at Marcus. Marcus was looking at the doctor. "She mentioned being tired," I said. "I thought it was the move. She and Marcus just bought the house. I figured she was worn out." Dr. Alvarado nodded slowly. He looked at Marcus. "And you? Have you noticed anything?" "She's been sleeping a lot," Marcus said. I thought the same thing. The move was a lot of stress. The doctor nodded again. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said carefully, "The preliminary panel is showing some abnormalities that are consistent with a toxic exposure. We're not ready to say definitively what we're looking at until the full labs come back. But I want to be honest with you both. What we're seeing does not look like a natural illness." The room was very quiet. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means we believe something has been introduced into her system over a period of time. The pattern of her symptoms, the specific markers we're seeing in her blood, this doesn't happen on its own. We've already contacted the hospital's patient advocate, and per our protocol, we're also notifying the appropriate authorities." Marcus said nothing. He was looking at the window that faced the parking structure. I looked at him. He turned to me a half-second later, and his face was arranged in an expression of appropriate shock. "My God," he said. "What does that mean? Someone did this to her?" "That's what it appears," Dr. Alvarado said. Marcus put his face in his hands. I watched him do it. That night, I sat in the hospital while Celia slept. The nurses let me stay past regular visiting hours. I pulled the chair close to her bed, and I held her hand, and I watched her breathe. And every time her chest rose and fell, I felt something in me loosen a little. She was here. She was still here. Around midnight, a detective came to the hospital. Her name was Detective Reyes, and she was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with a notepad and a measured way of asking questions that reminded me of the best project managers I'd worked with over the years. Methodical, never leading, listening more than talking. She told me the toxicology results had been expedited given the circumstances. They had found evidence of a compound in Celia's blood consistent with long-term exposure to a prescription anticoagulant, a blood thinner, not prescribed to Celia, administered in small amounts over what they estimated to be several weeks. Enough, over time, to be seriously dangerous. Enough, eventually, to be fatal. Someone had been poisoning her slowly, Detective Reyes said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I said. That's what you're telling me. We'd like to speak with her husband. He's here, I said. He's in the waiting room. I watched from down the hallway as Detective Reyes walked into the waiting room where Marcus was sitting with his phone in his hands. I want to tell you I knew for certain in that moment, but I didn't. I had suspicion, the cold, heavy, shapeless kind. I had the things I had noticed and stored away, but I didn't have certainty. And there is a difference between those two things that I had spent enough years in courtrooms and conference rooms to understand very well. What I had was a father's instinct, and a father's instinct is not nothing. In the days that followed, Celia slowly improved. The medical team had caught at the anticoagulant, and they were able to treat her and stabilize her and begin the long work of clearing her system. She was confused at first, when she was lucid enough to talk. She didn't understand what had happened to her. She kept asking me where Marcus was. I didn't know how to answer that, because by the second day, the detectives had begun to find things. Dolores, the cleaning woman, had given her statement. She had been cleaning for the household for about 6 weeks ever since Celia and Marcus moved in. In that time, she had noticed certain things that she had told herself were none of her business. Marcus came home later and later in the evenings. He and Celia argued, though Dolores had never heard the words clearly through the walls. And 2 weeks before she found Celia on the floor, Dolores had seen something in the bathroom cabinet when she was cleaning a prescription bottle with a label that had been partially peeled away. She hadn't thought much of it at the time. She didn't know whose it was or what was in it. She told the detectives. The detectives went to the house. They found the prescription bottle still in the cabinet, tucked behind a box of allergy medication. It had Marcus's name on it, or rather, it had the name of a person. Detective Reyes quickly determined did not exist at that address. A prescription obtained through a telehealth service under a slightly altered name. Paid for on a credit card that Marcus had opened 6 months earlier without Celia's knowledge. There was more. There is always more, when someone has been planning something carefully. The details come out in layers, each one colder than the last. Marcus had, it emerged, taken out a life insurance policy on Celia 14 months before they moved to Savannah. A significant one. He had presented it to her as something practical, responsible, something every married couple should have. Celia had signed the paperwork without question because she trusted him. Because that's what you do when you love someone. You trust them with the pen. He was also, the investigators found, carrying a debt that Celia did not know existed. Not a small one. A debt accumulated through a combination of failed investment accounts and a personal loan taken out against business prospects that had never materialized. His salary covered their visible life comfortably. It did not cover what he owed beneath the surface. The house in Savannah, the new beginning, the fresh start, it had been purchased largely on the expectation of money that Marcus didn't have yet, money he was apparently intending to collect. When I understood all of this, when Detective Reyes sat across from me in a conference room at the police department and laid it out, piece by piece, I felt something I had not expected to feel. I had braced myself for rage. I know what rage feels like in my body. The heat of it, the way it narrows your vision to a single point. What I felt instead was an immense, overwhelming exhaustion, the kind that sits in your bones, the kind that comes from realizing how long a thing has been happening while you were somewhere else, not knowing. Marcus was my daughter's husband. I had shaken his hand at their wedding. I had bought them a cast-iron skillet as a housewarming gift when they moved into their first apartment. I had sat across from him at Thanksgiving tables and Christmas dinners and believed, without examining the belief too closely, that he was simply a man who loved my daughter. He was arrested on a Wednesday. I was not there when it happened. Celia was still in the hospital. She did not know yet. I was the one who told her. I had asked Detective Reyes if I could be the one to tell her. I felt strongly about it. I didn't want her to hear it from a stranger, no matter how professional or careful that stranger was. She was my daughter. She was Margaret's daughter. If something this large needed to be said, I wanted it to come from someone who would still be there after the words landed. I sat beside her bed. She was sitting up by then, stronger, her color improved, though there were shadows under her eyes that I didn't think were going to disappear quickly. I took her hand the way I had taken it when she was small, fingers wrapped over hers, gentle. "There's something I need to tell you," I said, "and I want you to hear the whole thing before you say anything. Can you do that?" She looked at me. She has her mother's eyes, brown and steady and capable of holding more than most people realize. "Okay, Dad," she said. I told her. I went slowly. I left nothing out that I thought she deserved to know. When I finished, the room was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "How long?" "They believe at least 6 to 8 weeks. She absorbed that. She looked at the window. She said very quietly, "I kept thinking I had the flu. I kept thinking I was just tired from the move." She paused. "He kept bringing me soup. I didn't say anything. He kept bringing me soup and sitting with me and saying I needed to rest more. That I was pushing myself too hard." She shook her head slowly. "I trusted him. I know. I loved him. I know, sweetheart." She didn't cry then. She cried later. I know because the nurses told me, because I wasn't there for the later. She is a private person with her grief, like her mother was, and I respect that. But in that moment, sitting with me, she was very still and very present. And after a while she said, "Dad, how did you know to come?" I had been thinking about how to answer that question since the morning I drove out of the driveway in Knoxville. "I didn't know anything," I said. "I just felt something." "What kind of something?" "The kind you can't explain. The kind that doesn't wait to be explained." She was quiet. Then she reached over and put her other hand on top of mine so that both of her hands were holding mine, and she said, "Thank you for not waiting." I had to look at the window for a moment. The trial came 6 months later, in the spring. Marcus was charged with attempted murder and fraud. The insurance fraud component added weight to the case. It clarified intent, demonstrated premeditation, removed any possibility of this being explained away as an accident or a misunderstanding. His defense tried several angles. They questioned the chain of evidence. They suggested Celia might have obtained the medication herself without knowing. They painted Marcus as a devoted husband who was being unjustly accused. None of it moved the jury in the way his attorneys had hoped. Dolores testified. The pharmacist connected to the telehealth prescription testified. The forensic accountant who had traced the debt and the insurance policy testified. Marcus did not testify. The jury deliberated for less than 2 days. He was convicted on both counts. The judge sentenced him to 22 years, with the possibility of parole after 16. I know some people will say that isn't enough. I understand that feeling. In some corner of my own heart, I understand it. But I will tell you what I told my daughter when the verdict came in. Justice isn't always everything we need it to be. Sometimes it's just the best the system can offer, and we take it, and we keep living. Celia has been in therapy since the hospital. She found a good therapist in Savannah. She decided to stay, which surprised me at first and then made complete sense. She said she wasn't going to let what Marcus had done take her house away from her too. I thought that was exactly right. Dolores still cleans the house. Celia told me she gave her a significant raise and a standing invitation to stay for lunch whenever she wants. I think that's exactly right too. I drove back down to Savannah 3 weeks after the verdict, not because anything was wrong, because I wanted to see my daughter in her house, standing in her kitchen, healthy and whole, because I wanted to put yellow sunflowers in a mason jar on her windowsill, the way her mother used to do. She was there when I pulled up. She was standing on the front porch with a cup of coffee, and when she saw my truck, she raised the cup toward me in a small salute, and I raised my hand back through the windshield. I have thought many times about what would have happened if I had listened to that voice that said, "She's a grown woman. Don't interfere. Wait until she invites you." I have thought about the 5-hour drive I almost didn't make, the flowers I almost didn't buy, the driveway I almost didn't walk up. I don't believe in coincidences. I spent 31 years doing work where everything that holds together does so because of intention and calculation and care, not luck, not accident. I believe I drove to Savannah that morning because something in me knew what my mind had not yet been told. I believe Dolores stayed in that house and did not leave my daughter alone on that floor because she is a person of character who understood, without anyone explaining it to her, that some things are more important than staying out of someone else's business. And I believe my daughter is sitting on her front porch right now, on a warm evening in Savannah, watching the oak trees, breathing steadily, making plans for the future. That is enough. That has to be enough. And if you are watching this and you have a child you haven't spoken to in a few days, or a parent, or anyone you love who has gone a little quiet in a way that doesn't quite sit right, don't talk yourself out of it. Don't let politeness or distance or the fear of overstepping stop you from checking on the people who matter to you. Because sometimes the most important thing you will ever do is simply show up. If this story stayed with you, I'd be grateful if you'd leave a comment below. Tell me about a time someone showed up for you when you didn't know you needed it. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Stormborn Vengeance. Every week we bring you true stories about real people, about the moments that test us, and the ones that define us. I'll see you in the next one.